And that ball is stroked. Gone! Oh my goodness, on a frozen rope.
Throw in there on one hop. Out! Oh, he hosed him.
Hop steps, great dump off and a two-hand jam. And welcome back for episode 27 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. If you count the first episode I ever did as week 0, and I do, then we're officially a half a year in. It was all about Fantasy Football Friday number 2 last week. I'm going to skip over the NFL recapping that I did last episode. I actually had a ton of announcing to do, and I had really not much time to watch anything but the Sunday night and the Monday night games. I already covered the Thursday night game from last week with the Dolphins and Bills, Tua's latest concussion. I love Tua. I like him as a person and his game, but I said I'd rather see him hang it up and retire, and I stand by that. For today's episode, we're going to do another grab bag type week, so stay flexible. I'm going to kick this one off today with the MLB MVP races. There really wasn't anything to talk about on this for arguably a couple of months in the middle of the year, but the two frontrunners have slowed down a little bit. Of course, it's the Yankees' Aaron Judge and the Dodgers' Shohei Ohtani. Now, they still totally deserve to win, and they should run away with it. They're both historic in their own right. That should tell you even more, though, about how good guys like the Royals' Bobby Witt and the Mets' Francisco Lindor have been. There are other guys, even beyond those, who are going to have 30-plus home runs, 100 RBIs, and those kind of things, and not have any chance. Josh Naylor from Cleveland is one. Today, though, I really have to focus on the favorites and place what they're doing in a little bit more of a historical context. Now, the history that's on the line for these guys, if they win MVP, it's a really, really long list. I'm not going to get into all of it, but here's some of the big things that they would check off. Starting with Aaron Judge. He's slowed down big time in August and September. That's not a secret, but he's been over 50 home runs comfortably. He has 3 years now of over 50 homers. He's only the 4th guy ever to do that. And you might have heard of the others. Sammy Sosa, Alex Rodriguez, and Mark McGwire all had at least 3 of those. And a couple of those guys had some pharmaceutical assistance. Babe Ruth is the last one. At the time of recording, Ohtani hasn't gone over 50 home runs or 50 stolen bases yet, but I fully believe he will be the first guy ever to do it. He's at 48 and 49, by the way. I do think it's a formality. This is definitely going to happen, but neither of these guys has been as good in the back half of the year. They really don't have much room for improvement from that first half, to be fair. And of course, with the sheer number of at-bats that you get in a month, a full season, or a career, everyone kind of regresses toward the mean eventually. That's just what the mean means. We've never seen a full-time DH win MVP. The closest was a young Big Papi David Ortiz in 2005. Ohtani already has 2 MVPs thanks to just how awesome he is as a starting pitcher and an overall baseball player. Seeing as this will be his 3rd, and yes, I'm fully comfortable saying this in a definite sense, Ohtani, in my mind, he's now a Hall of Fame lock. Barry Bonds won 7 MVPs, right, which nobody's ever going to touch. A-Rod won 3 of them, but both those guys have some tainted resumes. Every other guy on the list who's won 3 MVPs, they're a first ballot Hall of Famer. Mike Trout's still active, and maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but I fully believe that Trout will be that as well, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Judge went over 300 career home runs this year, but this is weird. He has just over 1,000 hits, and he still hasn't played 1,000 games at 32 years old. He'll have that Rookie of the Year going for him. He'll have, likely this year as his 2nd MVP, the 3 seasons with the 50 home runs, and yet still, when you add it up, it's going to be kind of hard to call him a Hall of Famer when this year ends, at least. That's so weird, but it's the reality. In my first award predictions of the whole year, I had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. I told you that I refused to believe that Juan Soto or Aaron Judge would win it with the Yankees. I've been wrong for a long time just because Trout got injured early on, but 1 for 2 when you're going in blind, I feel like that's not bad. Now finally, I'm going to evaluate who I would rather have on my team picking between the two. Not even necessarily to build around like most people want to talk about, but who I would prefer my team to sign if they were available, say as a free agent this offseason, right? Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, they have their own unique aura. If Ohtani could speak better English, I think he would be the undisputed face of baseball for the next decade. He still uses an interpreter like most of the guys that come from overseas, but I think eventually he'll get there at least a little bit more. You've already seen some other stars like the Reds shortstop Ellie De La Cruz learning English really well and enough to do interviews without the interpreter. I would argue Judge is the more feared guy at the plate, just considering how he's bumped his average and his on-base numbers this year. Ohtani, again, probably going to steal 50 bases on over 90% success, which is absurd to a level that we've hardly ever seen before in the major leagues. But he doesn't play defense. The base running versus the glove, what would you rather have? It's tough to say, right? The coolest thing I heard about Ohtani recently is that he could even pitch in the playoffs this year. He had surgery last year, which reportedly was a little bit different from a normal Tommy John procedure, and it actually gave him a chance to come back a little bit earlier. There's always wins above replacement that can describe a guy's total impact on the game, quote unquote. At least that's what it's been sort of purported to do. I struggle sometimes with how much I believe that. But what WAR tries to do, it tries to synthesize everything that a player does between batting, base running, fielding, pitching, all of those things, and spit out one number. Judge has been ahead on WAR the entire year, and he absolutely cannot be caught. Funny enough, he has a pretty strong negative value in terms of his defense, but Judge's offensive WAR is 10.7 as of today. That would be the 15th best mark of all time, and he still has a handful of games to add to it. Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds, surprised to see those guys show up again, have most of the best seasons ever by WAR. There are the contracts to think about a little bit. Judge makes $40 million a year, and Ohtani makes $70 million. Age goes to Ohtani, meaning he's the younger one, 30 to 32. At the end of it all, I've gone back and forth for too long, and it's time to admit that I would want Ohtani, especially if it were on the Tigers. They need speed and stolen bases and more home runs so badly. If they could get those all in one player, I truly could not imagine it. And if he can be a mostly full-time starting pitcher next year, he could literally fill every hole on that roster. These guys are going to be the MVP in their respective leagues this year, but all things considered, I would want Ohtani for the long term. All right, lucky you get to hear Tanner from the future again. Thursday night, Shohei Ohtani officially did it, and with one of the greatest games probably ever in the history of Major League Baseball. Ohtani hit 3 home runs, drove in 10, and stole 2 bases. I can't wrap my head around that. He's officially created the 50-50 club, he's cemented his MVP, and truly one of the greatest individual performances in the history of the league, I gotta say. Just a quick little referendum there to fully close this debate and tell you why I would rather have Ohtani. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Now, I've really been off of the WNBA train for a moment, but I'm going to peek back into that league today for a couple of records. There are 2 big ones that just got broken recently, and like always, you can probably guess who they were if you peruse the league at all. First up is number 1 overall pick Caitlin Clark, shocker, and the single-season assist record. As if there was any doubt about the Rookie of the Year vote, this is just one more little punctuation mark. The number to beat was 316 assists for a year, which comes out to a little bit under 8 a game with the current 40-game regular season. Alyssa Thomas set the record last year, which tells you even more about how quickly the level of competition in that league has just skyrocketed up. Caitlin got there in part with the single-game assist record. She dropped 19 of them back on July 17th. I'm recording this Thursday before the regular season wraps, and she'll also have a very outside chance at the three-pointers made in a season record as well. That one was Sabrina Ionescu last year with 128. Caitlin needs 8 more to tie. I'm sure she's going to launch a ton of threes with that in mind, but if she comes up a little short, she can always just get it next year. Her averages sit at 19.5 points a game, 5.7 rebounds, and 8.4 assists, and she smashed that assist record for the season. It stands to reason she's going to pick up a ton more of these before too long, And most of the league's records are no longer safe with the explosion of recent talent. Now, speaking of explosion, the next record goes to the LA Aces' Asia Wilson for single-season scoring. This one got beaten in 35 games played. That's even more wild than the Caitlin Clark ones. The number to beat was 941 points, which would come out to a 40-game pace of about 23.5 a game. And Wilson's at a tick under 27. That is also easily a record. This one was set last Wednesday. Since then, Asia's pushed it even further the last 2 games and bumped it over 1,000. She should be winning her 3rd league MVP this year, and I like that prediction even more historically because she's won it in 2020 and 2022. If you like patterns, this is a good bet for you. If you're the leading scorer, rebounder, and you have the most block shots in the league for the year, I think that should take you most of the way. She already has back-to-back championships and a great chance for a 3rd one this year. Not one logical argument against her for MVP. I'm really glad I waited until Thursday because Asia Wilson already dropped one more record on us since I started planning out this episode. I didn't even know this one was on the table, but it does make a lot of sense considering her whole body of work this year. This one's for single-season rebounds with 447. Now, here's the asterisk about the record. Angel Reese, the rookie for the Chicago Sky, would have run away with this one. She had already set the record back on September 1st with almost a month to play, and she was averaging over 13 boards a game with Asia coming in at around 11.9. When Angel Reese fractured her wrist, she lost the chance to put this out of reach. I'm not certain how many categories one can lead the league in or how many records you can set without being the unanimous MVP. There were tons of other awesome performances across the W this year, but it would be disrespectful to put anyone else really in the MVP conversation. I don't know if it will be a unanimous win for Asia Wilson, but I do think that it should be. Now I'm going to do a little check-in on MLB playoff races. When it comes to the American League, I believe in my cardiac cats, the Detroit Tigers, more than I've ever believed in anything maybe. They're not fully in control yet, but they've made a ton of ground up on the Twins and the Royals. As of today, they're tied with Minnesota for the last wild card. Only thing to keep in mind is the Twins do have head-to-head over them, so the Tigers need to finish on top there in the standings. Detroit's low point was 7 games under 500 a few days after the All-Star break. They're the best team since the beginning of August in the entire league, and it's not super close. Whether they make it in the playoffs or not, they're going to be remembered for the most inspiring run that the league's seen in years. They could even catch the Royals for the 2nd wild card spot. They had just swept KC head-to-head, and they're only 2 games back of them with 9 more to play. The Mariners and the Red Sox aren't mathematically out of it yet, but they have 2.5 and 3.5 to make up respectively. They've both been noticeably below 500 against teams with a winning record. They're probably toast. The Yankees and the Guardians are the only 2 American League teams that have clinched a berth at all, but the Astros, with only 82 wins as of today, are 5 games ahead in the AL West and practically have that wrapped up. In all likelihood, Cleveland, New York, and Houston are going to be the division winners there. Now to the National League. The Padres, Diamondbacks, and Mets are the ones holding the wild card spots right now in that order. It's a little bit more boring, a little bit less competitive over here, arguably. The Braves are the only other team within 7 games of that last wild card spot. I can't believe that, but as I go to check the standings again, that's true. They're only 1.5 back of the Mets for the final NL wild card spot. The Phillies, Dodgers, and Brewers have been 3 of the best teams in the league by any measure this year, and those are your division leaders for East, Central, and West. The Brewers are actually the only ones to clinch their division so far. They won the Central, but the Phillies have 91 wins, so that'll be a formality. Philly has to win 9 of their last 10 if we're going to have a single team go over 100 wins. So let me rephrase that. No one is going over 100 wins this year. Not a chance. Phillies are good, but not that good. They've been the best team most of this year, but that gap is just not very big between them and any of the other top teams. I do have a World Series pick in mind, and I'll be excited to give that prediction to you soon, meaning as soon as the playoffs start. Of course, I'm going to drop that into an episode. The last thing I want to hit on today is all about fans and interactions with characters in sports, we'll call them, and a reminder to never make it personal. This is a weird and kind of creepy one, but it does at least tangentially involve football. Dan Campbell was brought in as the Lions head coach in 2021. He turned them around from the perennial laughingstock of the entire NFL to an NFC Championship game last year. Now, they then lost to the 49ers, and apparently coach has had a problem ever since then, or maybe even earlier. I hope to never hear about this kind of thing again, but I gotta imagine it's not that uncommon anymore, especially in the digital age. People found out where he lived, and he's being forced to move for what ESPN sort of lightly described as privacy reasons. We can all read between the lines and parse out that they've probably been pranked, harassed, threatened. We know how football fans are, right? My point is that this shouldn't be dismissed as sort of a danger of the job or something every famous person has to put up with. The family is said to have filed multiple police reports, and they've already moved out and sold that house. One of my points is this goes way deeper than just Dan Campbell. A few NFL players already this year have posted things like screenshots of people in their DMs on Instagram saying some atrocious things. A lot of these are around betting and pointing out how badly the guy played. Imagine this, like, oh, you weren't the featured receiver in the game plan this week? Then you owe me the $1,000 I lost betting on you. That requires some incredible mental gymnastics, right? Will Levis, the Titans quarterback, just said he had his cell phone number leaked this week and he's going to have to change it. Of course, he was going to get grilled alive about his play. If there was any way people could keep it civil and fair, then I wouldn't find it as big of a deal, but that's not really how fandom works. I'm even going to throw out Bryce Young and his situation with the Panthers as one more example that no one should get too personal about. Now, I've been highly critical of Bryce Young, but only in this context as the Panthers' starting quarterback. He was great at Alabama, like everyone else is, has the national championship to show for it. Since he came into the league last year, though, I still believe he's been the worst QB. He's got that 2-16 record. Nothing's really gone right. Negative touchdown to interception ratio. Even if I were a Panthers fan, which I'm fortunately not, I think it would be pretty obvious how severely the organization has failed him all around, just as it's gone the other way. The draft picks that the Panthers gave up to make the trade and take him first overall, they're probably too much for any pick ever. If they had gotten the next Andrew Luck, I still would probably criticize this move. People often like to go through each one of the draft picks that the Bears got as a result of the trade. That's kind of tired and overdone. So I'll just say they got a number 2 wide receiver in DJ Moore and their starting quarterback for this year, Caleb Williams, who also doesn't look so hot, plus other starters. You cannot ever know without a doubt what any draft pick will turn into, so I never like to be too picky about that. Now think of all of these decisions. The choices to start, to bench, or trade Bryce Young this year, the initial idea the Panthers had to trade up for him. These choices are being made all the time in every sports league in the world with the goal of winning games. They're also not made by one person. Travis Kelce hasn't been getting many targets through the first 2 weeks. Do you really need to attack him for it? Do you really think that Andy Reid isn't going to figure out a way to deploy him in December and have him go nuts like he always does? There's a little bit of personal onus on fans to be adults and show a little respect. If you don't feel it, then fake it even. You can't affect the outcome of a game from at home on the couch any more than I can affect it from the booth. So you should probably try to just enjoy. Be decent, be realistic. Again, don't make it personal. Now, I won't say don't talk any smack or don't heckle guys when you're sitting close enough to them in the stands. That's a right that you paid good money for. Just keep it fair when you're going to do that. And that's all for episode 27 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. I'll likely toss some more fantasy football stuff in next week, Probably starting to dip into some of the big injuries because I've been affected by two huge ones in Christian McCaffrey and Cooper Kupp on both my lineups, and maybe some injury replacements that I recommend, that kind of thing. Of course, beyond that, whatever else catches my eye is always on the table, and those MLB playoff races will be just about done. Remember, you can always reach out to me on my socials if you have anything you want me to talk about next. Instagram and TikTok at The Voice of Tanner, connect on LinkedIn, and of course, leave a like, comment, and share. This has been episode 27 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
And that ball is stroked. Gone!
Oh my goodness, on a frozen rope.
Throw in there on one hop. Out! Oh, he hosed him.
Hop steps, great dump off, and a two-hand jam.